Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our oil spill response knowledge transfer webinar. This is our webinar 2. My name is Lin Zhao. My colleague Tim Nedved and I are from ExxonMobil. We are focusing on oil spill response research. Today's guest speaker is Ms. Hayward Walker, and my colleague Tim will introduce her in a few minutes. Before I turn it over to him, I have some nuts and bolts I need to go over. And also, in order to make this make this webinar more interactive, Ms. Walker used the Mentimeter. So before the webinar, I sent out an email to tell you like how to log into the webinar. So if you can go to www.mentimeter.com and enter the code 39171695, and then you can answer questions and give thumbs up, thumbs down, etc. So I used this. We tested before the webinar, and it was great. And if you can, you open the Menti in a separate screen. If you are in the office, you have different screens. If you're not, maybe you can open the Menti in your phone, etc. So the purpose of the webinar is to allow the highly experienced, seasoned oil spill response experts to share their knowledge to the world. It's also a good platform to communicate and share insights and perspectives from different groups. For example, industry, academia, oil spill responders, and other oil spill experts. So we are planning to host the webinar in a monthly basis. The webinar will be held every first Tuesday of the month. From the feedbacks from last webinar, we changed the time to 10 a.m. US Houston time, but we still keep the 1 hour and 15 minutes webinar time. We also want to host the webinar indefinitely, depending on the feedbacks, and also whether we can schedule a proper speaker. To let you know that we have already scheduled the webinars for the next 3 months, and I will send out the webinar agenda shortly. So for the format, we give the speakers 1 hour to talk and then 15 minutes for questions. The attendees can only ask questions through Q&A section, Q&A button, and then we'll read the questions to the speaker. Any questions that are not answered during the scheduled time, we'll go through them. We'll go through the rest of the question at the end of the scheduled time. So for your information, this webinar will be recorded by both audio and visual means to be used by ExxonMobil, and also later on we'll release it in an API website. So if you cannot stay long, you can still check the webinar afterwards. Also, if you don't like to be announced by your name when you submit the questions, you can also choose send out the questions anonymously. This is basically all the things that I need to go through. I will give the floor to Tim to introduce our speaker. Tim.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I don't want to spend too much time, so let me go through this quickly. I mentioned this last month, but this knowledge transfer is something that I envisioned for the Clean Gulf Conference last year, and there was really, when we were doing the planning session, there was a lot of enthusiasm for doing this, and then we have the lockdowns, and we haven't been able to meet in person as an oil spill response community. But I think this Zoom format is as good as that, because we are certainly getting a lot more participants than we might at a session at Clean Gulf. And so the reason I suggested that last year was because through my career, as I said last time, is I've had the really great opportunity to speak with people who have been working in this business for a long time. And so last month we had Al Allen, but this month who has his experiences, and then this month it's Ann Hayward, and I chose her because I wanted to, and she's going to talk about kind of the challenges with communicating complex ideas. And I just wanted to stress with her how important that is in our business, where things are somewhat complicated and we're working with stakeholders and others who may have a completely different perspective, certainly than we do in the industry. So this knowledge transfer is a great opportunity for us all to kind of come together and listen to people who have been working some of these issues for a long time. So Ann Hayward has been working, and she's going to go through a lot of her background, so I'm going to be very brief. But Ann Hayward has been working in this business for a long time. She actually has a background in architecture as an architect, and like Al Allen last time, she decided that what she studied in school was not necessarily what she wanted to do for a career, and she's doing something quite a bit different from architecture right now. An interesting thing is she was one of the first NOAA scientific support coordinators and the first one to work outside of the central office that I think she's going to talk about. And she worked for a long time as an independent consultant, and she has a lot of experience in this area. So I'll let her describe things in more detail, but with that, I'll give it over to you, Ann Hayward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Lynn. It really is a huge honor to be invited to participate in this knowledge transfer and to follow Al Allen. I mean, my gosh, he's just brilliant. And I'm just thrilled. So I also just want to say, I really think this idea of knowledge transfer is a theme that I'm going to kind of take throughout this talk today, because what we really are, connecting the dots for complex spills, these spills here that are shown, this is Ixtoc, this is Deepwater Horizon, this is the Rena container ship in New Zealand, this is the Selendang off of Alaska, this is from the Prestige, this crab, this is the Exxon Valdez, and this is the Hebe Spirit in Korea. And so when we talk about complex spills, or we'll get into that a little bit more, but connecting the dots to me means, how do we connect the dots to understand the situation really quickly, really accurately, completely? How do we then act, make decisions to figure out the right things to do, and that is to mitigate impacts. And a lot of this process that we do, with and without response actions, it really depends a lot on regulations. And so that's kind of a context that I'm going to set for this. The other idea about impacts is direct or indirect, and to what extent do we count direct versus indirect impacts and anticipate that to inform what things we should do. Now, we try to implement a lot of our solutions in preparedness and contingency planning. And so that's really the way that we hit the ground running when there's a response. But I think what we found is that we don't always have everything we need in contingency planning. And so what do? How do we kind of connect the dots better for a spill that doesn't meet our perfect planning scenario? So with that, if that sounds good to everybody, we're going to go on. Now, those of you who are on the phone who know me, I think you've heard me talk a lot probably about engaging people and collaborating. And I just want to use this opportunity today with the seminar to demonstrate that in a small way. So if you all would go to, as Lynn said, go to this www.menti.com and input this code. Look how easy it is. That's all you have to do. Implement the code. Then you can participate in this call and interactive way, which I personally think is a new solution to death by PowerPoint, right? That we all kind of glaze over with death by PowerPoint. So I'm going to demonstrate this in a small way, and I still will do some non-interactive slides. But anyway, let's go. Let's try it. So first one is, this is one slide format you can do. So this is going to show a word cloud. So you just enter today any word that you want about where you are, anywhere you want. Anyway, any word. And a few minutes ago, there were only about 44 people participating. We'll see if everybody wants to, well, it looks like we may have more. So we have more people participating now than we did on the previous slide. And one way I use this is to say, when I see about the same number of people every time, then I know everybody's had a chance to complete. So what's cool about this is you get an idea as a speaker right away where everybody's from. So we cannot assume everybody's from the United States, right? Or even from the same part of the country, which I think is pretty exciting to learn right off the bat. And I love the freedom that this format gives to people to put things in their own words. Personally, I hate multiple choice. I never seem to have the right answer in multiple choice. So this format allows people to respond in their whatever way they want. So we've got people from Granite Bay, from Maputo. Seems like a lot of people are from home, a lot of people in Houston. So this word cloud gives you you can see a way to, it gives you a sense of somebody from Hamburg. I love it. I love it. Okay, so where are we up to? 88. So in order to keep going, because I don't know how many people we actually have on the line, I'm going to let this stand for now. I'm going to advance it. Okay, next slide. I'm going to start a countdown so that you all can see it. But let's go on now. So here's another format. And we can learn a little bit about you real time, right? Without any easy. Are you an industry or a shipping guy? Or are you state government, federal government? You work for an OSRO? Are you a consultant, NGO, academic, others? So you can sort of weigh in. Again, this is a different way, a different format. There are all kinds of formats in Mentimeter. So what I'm doing, oh, wait a minute. Voting is closed. Let's see. Okay. Can you all do it now? Is it working? Okay, there we go. And the other thing I like about this Mentimeter, it's real time, right? So we know right away.
And just so you know, there's about 150 people online.
150 people. Okay, well, I'm going to start the countdown clock so everybody can see it, right? Can everybody see the countdown clock? I'm going to have to put my glasses on to see the tiny.
I see it.
You see it? Okay.
Seconds.
Oh, I see. I don't see it because my screen images are in the way. Let me move where the screen images are. There we go. Now I can see it. Okay. And I just took this from a different format. We could have drilled down into other, we could come up with other categories. There's lots of different ways, but this was just easy. And I thought it would be fun to see what kind, and we have one academic online. So I'm going to talk a lot about academia, and I'm thrilled that you're participating. I'm thrilled that you joined us. Okay, so now we're going to go on to more of the topics today, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, like why do I see things the way I do? And just bearing on what Tim said, I'm telling you from my own perspective. I've tried to support government and industry and communities for a lot of years. And this, I'm going to explain why I see things the way I do. Because I think, we choose what we're going to do in preparedness and response within the context of regulation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, framing and informing oil spill decisions. I'm going to talk about communications, but more in the context of transferring knowledge about what we think to one another, about learning from one another, about getting a shared understanding of things, and doing that preparedness, but also real time, right? And kind of how that relates to perceptions about impact and risk and messaging. So I'm just I've thought a lot about what could make a spill complex. I'm not sure I have the definitive answer, but I'm going to share with you what strikes me. If I see a spill that has these kinds of things, I'm going to not be surprised if things start to get really hard. And one of the aspects of this is human dimensions of oil spills. Human dimensions are anything which aren't ecological impacts. So it's a big bucket. I'm going to suggest some adaptations, like, I guess the logical thing for you all to say is, so what? What do what's the bottom line? So I'm going to give you some ideas of what I think are things you could do, we could all do, that are not terribly hard and within the discretion of our jobs. And along with that, some benefits, and I'll give you some supporting information. Okay, onward. So my background, I sort of have to go back and simply say I was a child that grew up near the beach. I lived one house from the ocean. I used to go, the beach was kind of my friend, the waves. I spent a lot of time looking underwater, up at the waves. It was a big deal to me. My father was in the Navy, so we moved around a lot, and ships and engines and paint smell and diesel fumes. He was a fighter pilot, so he was a definitely think outside the box kind of guy, and that sort of, I think, set a foundation for me that I was completely unaware of, but which is really important. At the same time I was doing this, there was a show on TV called Sea Hunt that was all about scuba diving. This is really late 50s, early 60s. And it kind of reinforced being in the water and looking up under the water and being under the water. Okay, so then I want to say, we moved to Europe. We lived in Italy 4 years when I was a teenager. I went to school in Paris during Vietnam, my first year of college. We got transferred ultimately to Hawaii, very multi-ethnic culture. And then my parents went on to Bangkok for 2 years. So we it's always been about adapting to where we live. It's not been about us. And I just want to acknowledge, again, I immediately got scuba certified and started school again with architecture and environmental planning. But my boss at the time, I was a failed waitress. I only waitressed like 3 nights in my whole life. And my boss was John Craven, who was a marine research pioneer. Somebody who looked at, found a submarine that was lost off the coast of Spain. He was a researcher in terms of search techniques. He's an engineer. He started the underwater habitat. Sylvia Earle was a huge friend of his. And he moved to Hawaii, and he's from New York originally. He wrote haiku poetry. He was the founding UH Dean of Marine Programs, State Marine Affairs Marine Coordinator. And he started this thing called Marine Option Program, which was an undergraduate certificate program for undergraduates, instead of going on for a marine science kind of a graduate thing. My skill set was not being a biologist or anything. My skill set was helping build an underwater pipeline to bring fresh seawater to a marine lab there as a scuba diver. And I also kind of explored native uses of Hawaiian seaweed, which was pretty fascinating. Anyway, and I was ultimately hired to work for, but to have a boss like that was pretty outstanding. And I've had bosses like that are kind of, he believed in floating cities, law of the sea, manganese nodule, thermo, all kinds of energy in the sea. So just to be a nobody in his office and I worked my way through school. So it was cool. It was great. So then I was hired after I graduated. I worked on the Hawaii Coastal Program. What do you do? Architecture to urban and regional planning. Coastal planning was a logical transition. And then I was hired at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And my first project was, give her the non-science project, was to go figure out where, if they discovered oil and gas in the late 70s off the Atlantic coast, where you would bring it ashore with pipeline corridors. So it was a very multidisciplinary project. And, I first was also introduced to fishermen all along the way. Newport, Rhode Island, we used to go down to the docks and get lobsters from fishermen. And in Virginia, they said they hired me because I could say I was from Virginia and the fishermen wouldn't shoot me. And you can see, if you can see that well enough, this sign on the York River that says, keep out or get shot. So I've sort of had this assigned relationship with fishermen. And I learned a lot, I think, about operational people and, ships. I also wanted to learn about hazmat. Hazmat spills are really terrible. They kill people, unlike oil. And so I was able to ask and get permission to go on a parcel tanker. This is 10 days in the Houston Ship Channel. And if you can see this, they let me do hands-on, clean the tanks. And my second project was to look at LNG going up to Cove Point, Maryland. And I revisited my LNG routes from 2000 to about 2008, working on a siting project for BP in New Jersey. So anyway, just to give you some visuals, what does all this mean? Well, so obviously I was really, connected to the water. And for me, travel, seeing other places, other people was part of my education. My parents believed travel equaled education. To kind of summarize, it was actually a BP person who said, "Oh, you connect the dots." And I thought, well, that's like in the coloring book. And they said, "No, you really connect the dots." So I really hadn't thought about that way until he said it. But so trying to understand things, science help you get a technical understanding of the ocean and how we affect things with uses of the ocean, but also experience, what the people on the ship see and how that factors into knowledge, right? That's all about knowledge. I'm a generalist because I was assigned all these multidisciplinary projects. I had big picture supportive bosses at University of Hawaii, at VIMS, very multidisciplinary. I had to work with all the different scientific groups to do these pipeline studies in LNG. John Robinson at NOAA was like a visionary, a Pied Piper, go on and make it happen kind of guy. The Coast Guard has been wonderful to me my entire life, whether I consider the OSCs my bosses or RRT heads and Mike Sams. I'm grateful to you so long, even though I'm not even an SSC anymore, and industry too. So these have all helped framed my context. So I was really the first NOSSC established in the region from 1980 to 1990. And all that time, I was a contract SSC, first under VIMS as a state employee, and later in 1983, I started my company, SEA Consulting Group. And I did a lot of other stuff in that context, but we won't go into that. But really about complex spills, we got to throw dispersants into the mix, right? And alternative response measures. I mean, dispersants is the big conundrum we've got and the controversy, but we got in situ burning and herders and all these other things which are so-called added to mechanical recovery. So that's been part of my life, I guess, since I started as an SSC in 1980. And because I was at VIMS and I started at UH, I sort of have this natural tendency to collaborate with academic researchers. I was also a PI for 2 dispersant risk communication projects and also collaborated with researchers in GOMRI. And it all helped, I think, make my thinking broader and I feel maybe more helpful to contribute to my community. So when we have a spill that happens, and I borrowed this from Charlie Henry, we basically have a big void, a black nothing. We haven't verified necessarily the coordinates of where it happened, how much happened, what the material was spilled. From the very first notification, we haven't verified very much. So we begin making decisions with uncertainty and unknowns. And that's just the reality of oil spill response, even with the best preparedness. And if Jackie, if you're on the line, I want to acknowledge this is really important for everybody for us to all understand. We've never been to the same spill twice. So even if we have planning scenarios, the chances of getting a real spill that match that planning scenario are likely different. And the variables will different, the time of year, the date, the volume, the oil type, what's happening in the environment. So that's a really important context. Okay, so when we make these oil spill response decisions, what are the right things to do? Should we just meet the regulatory requirements? Should we solve problems? Right, we're trying to solve a problem, but how far do we go with that? Are we only going to really mitigate pollution impacts into the environment? And if we mitigate the pollution impacts to the environment, that'll take care of everything else. Do we, within the context of regulations, spend tax dollars for OPA 90 if you're in the US or whatever laws in accordance with compensation regimes? So, restoration, damages. So do we only do that? Because in my career, when it comes to the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund, there are pretty definite guidelines to what you're going to spend dollars on and that limits what we can do. Are we going to share information in a way that maintains corporate institutional reputation? So not just responsible party, and that can be the Navy or government, but You know, how much does that drive our decision making? Do we only do what we can prove? That only do things that we have scientific evidence for? And, you know, do we go beyond what's required? And I suggest to you that for complex spills, we do go beyond what's required. But so how do we know what to do? You know, certainly for Exxon Valdez, we spent way more than was required. Same thing for Deepwater Horizon. So I just want to use this as a launching pad. So to me, you know, informing these decisions, we have to rely on pre-spill planning, but we also couple that with the incident-specific conditions of the response. And to me, our best information is from knowledge, facts, information, skills acquired through experience, education, scientific research. And science includes both natural and social science, right? And what that means is it's through systematic study, it's evidence and reproducible finding. The problem I have as a scientific support coordinator is we never had perfect science to answer all the questions for that particular spill. And to do research at the time, we're going to have to make decisions before we have the findings. So to me, science is the best, but it's not always enough. So where do we get knowledge? Well, certainly from the researchers and the oil spill planners and responders, but also the operators. And to me, I would suggest after working, you know, with pilots and people on ships and native communities in different places, traditional and local knowledge is key. You know, fishermen and pilots will know really more about currents today than maybe even, sorry to be sacrilegious, even maybe the NOAA charts about when a slack tide is and when the tide will shift. So that to me, these are some of the challenges beyond regulations. So our U.S. regulations are pollution driven. They're Clean Water Act. And it was all based on what we knew at the time and what was the driver. That you heard Al talk about the Santa Barbara oil spill in the last presentation, but that was really pollution driven. And the last National Contingency Plan was finalized in 1994. We just had a recent revision for dispersants, but basically the whole NCP has not been updated since 1994, and I suggest we're a little outdated. So how do we incorporate emerging knowledge for things that we didn't know back in 1994? And even though we have ICS, which is the only best game in town, if you talk to researchers in disasters, they will tell you that it has tactical strengths. It's vertical, it's very vertical, command and control. That's where it came from. It came out of military and out of firefighting, but it has strategic weaknesses where it doesn't really enable very good collaboration outside the command post. And that's a weakness. And that's why we responders get second guessed in some of these big complex spills, and why people weigh in, because they're not seeing that we're addressing the entire problem. I would say one of the biggest problems, you know, is with regard to human dimension, and especially way beyond what insurance will compensate people for. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And really human health when it comes to food and seafood, whether it be for personal use or communal use, is a real big problem because the oil spill response really doesn't manage that issue. But that issue comes about as a result of the oil spill. So to me, we have kind of a big disconnect, and we can pass it off and say, well, that's FDA's problem, that's CDC's problem, that's State Departments of Health problem. But the bottom line is if we completely eliminate our connectivity to that, I don't think we're providing complete information for the people who are affected. If we close a fishery, who are worried about eating contaminated seafood. So I think we have room to grow there. And then there's the legal barriers, especially responsible parties. I was on the RP side during Deepwater Horizon. It was a huge awakening for me. And the bottom line is they want you to basically say a message which is consistent with a legal review. And that was true in my experience on Deepwater Horizon, even for government, state government and federal government. So these are issues which are barriers to us. You know, if we keep saying, how can we be successful? Well, these are things that are challenges. And so what do we do about it? We just say, so what? Deepwater Horizon, Exxon Valdez only happens every 20 years, not my problem. I suggest that there are things we can do to do better and to have our efforts better understood and better appreciated. So back to Tim's point about communications, I'm really I'm going to say this one time in the nicest way I can say, messages are essential, but they're insufficient to address some of these problems in oil spill response. So I'm not saying get rid of messages. I'm just saying, if you think messages are going to do the trick, I think you're completely wrong. So during Deepwater Horizon, all we said over and over again was, how do we ever get ahead of this? How do we get ahead of this? And I think what we're really talking about was the public perceptions, whether it be elected officials or the public or the local communities who thought we were failing, that we were one giant fail. Well, we didn't fail at everything. We actually did more than we were required to do, but people didn't understand that. So one thing that the risk communication researchers and psychologists and others have told us is if response officials are too slow, people will turn elsewhere. So if we try to get the perfect message, we will lose our place to be the ones that influence the conversation. And that lays the groundwork for social media to rise and dominate. People will go, researchers have shown that people will go to they want to go to the source of the information, the officials, the regulatory authorities. But if they can't get the answers to their questions and concerns, they're going to go elsewhere. And they will go to Ricky Ott. And those of you who have been around long enough know what I'm saying. So there are detailed questions and concerns that people have about spills. We're focused on managing the oil. We really can't address every single thing. Now, in Deepwater Horizon, in Exxon Valdez, I was assigned to go work with subsistence fishermen. So that was kind of out of the mainstream. In Deepwater Horizon, I was assigned to dispersants first. We were trying to do a lot of things real time. We were trying to coordinate with inside the command post. But then I was assigned, well, first of all, I was working on the BP side, but I had FOSCs who have known me for a long time say, write me some dispersant talking points. I want you to go out and talk to communities. And what I was hearing was everybody was scared to death of dispersants. I mean, really scared. So I was assigned to go out in Louisiana. I was to man the dispersant table when people had questions. And almost all those questions were about human health, not ecological. They didn't like the ecological. They worried about it killing the fish, but mostly there were human health concerns. And so one thing I learned is that we were not trusted. So how do we convey information and collaborate with people who are trusted in the communities? We can use their distribution networks if we know about it. And if Yvonne is on the phone today, California has made great strides in trying to address this and immediately activate assistant liaison officers. And in the new Incident Management Handbook, which is now 2014, I think, this is described in pretty good detail, but we don't train that part very much in our normal training. So I'm going to tell you the second dispersant risk communications project I did was funded by Coastal Response Research Center. See down here at the bottom, response risk communication tools for dispersants and oil spills. We published 5 papers in 2014 in the Journal of Human and Ecological Risk Assessment, an international journal. And you can find it in that issue, those papers and the introduction on these pages. Okay, so let me just back up here again. Before we go public, run this by legal first. If we do that, we lose the opportunity for people to listen to us, the people who have most knowledge about the spill. So that's a dilemma, right? What do we do about that? And the other point is communications really is about risk perceptions, and learning about people's risk perceptions enables us to do somewhat about communicating information about the risk and ultimately better managing the risk, right? Okay, so let's go on. So in this project, we looked at a lot of different things, but I think the social media one is the one that in a glance is probably most interesting to all you guys. So this is an analysis of over 112,000 tweets during Deepwater Horizon. So the researchers were out there grabbing all this Twitter data, right? And when we put in the proposal, when NOAA and CRC put out the request for proposal and they wanted dispersants and risk communication for oil spills and dispersants, we had Kate Starbird Bob Pavia helped me connect with her. And we had the researcher from the Ann Bostrom, also at University of Washington, who worked with me in the mid 90s under a project for MSRC. We all kind of connected and oh God, I've got a mental block. Oh shoot. Anyway, wrote the FOSC report, University of Washington, Tom Lachine for Exxon Valdez. So the 5 of us were the principal investigators. Anyway, Kate Starbird is just a, she's incredible. And these were the tweets. And what you saw was, so the biggest influencers were International Bird Rescue, National Wildlife Federation. IBRC was in the command post, believe it or not, but I don't think they were the part that was tweeting information about this. Who Dat, you can see how big this influencer is. She's an individual citizen in Louisiana. We did have some celebrities. This oil spill, 2010, we were late to the game in Twitter, and then we shut it down. So we could have been a bigger influencer, but we didn't leverage that opportunity. And then you can see the red political blogosphere. Well, they were not the dominant voices, right? And media was not even the dominant voices. Green were locals, NGOs, and the core conversation. Now, what we learned was that this is something they call in that social media research, sense making. Sense making is when people are trying to make sense of the situation. And these people, even in 2010, were sophisticated. The Twitter users were working to make sense of the scientific complexity, and they often cited sources. They put a URL in their tweets to another site that made explicit mention of the viewpoints of scientists. So science is powerful, but did we leverage that to every extent possible during Deepwater Horizon? No. Are we ready to do it tomorrow? I don't think so. So dispersant-related tweets were more likely than any other oil spill tweets to concern cleanup strategy and efficiency. Are they working? Are they bad? That sort of thing. 76% of dispersant tweets were on that. And health impacts. Health impacts for dispersants, 13% of them want to know about human health versus 2% for any other oil spill tweet. So we know this, right? So this is how research can help us be better informed. Now, this is after the fact, but I suggest we can learn from this, incorporate it. Okay, so wait a minute. So I've tried to say, okay, how can we make things more interactive? How can we engage with the locals? How can we help share information about dispersants? So I did a ton of things. If anybody's on from Sector Virginia or Region 3, they really gave me full reign to try and implement a lot of these on my own. I didn't get paid for it, to implement all these different things. So I took the 4-page with the state of Virginia, RT rep for oil, John Giese. We developed a training module, an hour-and-a-half training module that was based primarily on the National Academy Dispersant Study, the original version that had a 4-page question and answer thing. And we implemented, and we did other work from NOAA, and we included some other stuff from NOAA and from SINTEF. And we asked them interactive questions. Before we begin, so we had like 22 people, we had communities, we had NGO people in the audience, and we had a lot of new Coast Guard people, right? Because this is now 9 years after Deepwater Horizon. And we asked them, before we begin, what questions do you have about dispersants? So they want to know, how do they work? This is like one of 4 screens of rolling grid. What are the negative aspects? What are the hazards of use? What's the history? Do they work? What are the toxicity levels? So you see how powerful this is to not give somebody a multiple choice question, but let them say it in their own words. So for us leading a talk about dispersants, trying to share what we know, this is helpful for us to know what's in people's minds. Then we also said was, at some point before we got into kind of the environmental effects, I asked him, I said, okay, when it comes to the effects of, this is using Mentimeter, obviously. When it comes to effects of dispersant use in dispersed oil, my biggest concerns would be what? So you can see they wanted to know the complexity, right? They were into the details. What's the long-term wildlife impact? What's the long-term toxicity? What's the harm to marine life? What's the effect on drinking water? That's a human health thing, right? What's the effectiveness rate? How close to shore can we use them? What's public health? toxicity in marine life were the main things, but look at all the other stuff, right? Human health, there it is again. And then at the end, we said, what's the most important thing you learned today? And that told us really, you know, it helped us understand, what did we accomplish? Did we accomplish anything? And they said, wow, we learned how few times dispersants have been used. A lot of studies have been conducted. Dispersion allows for more rapid dilution and bioavailability of oil in a large water mass. Seriously, they got that out of all this? That's great. Okay, they learned no dispersants close to shore. May not be as bad as everyone makes them out to be. There are conditions that limit. This is just one of 4 pages of this, where there are conditions. So I think this tool as a training tool, if we make it interactive, is powerful. Okay, so back to now what I consider human dimensions in oil spill response. So I was assigned during Exxon Valdez working with the native corporations and villagers in these different Chenega Bay, well, anyway, it doesn't really matter what they were. You can see that they're spread throughout Prince William Sound, also around Kodiak and down. And they were primarily subsistence fishermen, personal use. So they didn't care what the FDA said. They didn't care. They said, we eat way more than you people in the lower 48. We don't care what your regulations say as safety. There's a whole thing on subsistence testing, any kind of testing, really we had to come up back then. Usha Varanasi at the NOAA Lab Pacific Northwest came up with testing to how to measure, not necessarily for subsistence, but for commercial. How do we know if it's safe to eat? And it was landmark. So we had emerging issues and we had to adapt the science right then. And you can see, just to give you an example, how we've had to do that for the last 18 months, right? How many people believe blanket what CD says? CD says, not everybody. In deep water, then if Ed Owens, if you're on the phone, Ed took me to Bolivia in 2000 to work on a Trans-Redes pipeline spill. That's up in the Altiplano, like way, way up in Bolivia, more than 7,000 feet above sea level in the Altiplano. And again, we had to work with people. I was asked to help settle claims and work with agronomists and veterinarians. And they were really concerned about, you know, well, this is a river. This is not fresh. This is fresh water. This is a river. And it's different. We're not talking now about fish, it's other things. Same sort of issues again. And working again with indigenous people. Deepwater Horizon, again, there were Vietnamese fishermen. They really didn't get part of the assignments very much, but they were affected. Then trying to go out to where people work, you know, regular commercial fishermen in Louisiana, go out and visit them. So again, I have this reinforcement of all these experiences of how do we get ahead of this? And what do we need to know that's not part of our normal ICS training process? So it gets back to Rick's perception. So in Bolivia, flamingos were a big deal because flamingos feed in the shallows, right? They go back and sit on their nest. This is a volcano. They lay one egg. This is like a little volcano. And these indigenous people, the Urumati, Ed, I wish I knew if you were on the phone, but anyway, if the eggs rolled down, the Urumati would go pick them up and sell them, and that's how they made their living. So, and then there were sheep and goats, and then we had to know if the goats and the sheep ate the oiled grass, would that affect their ability to make beef jerky and goat cheese and sell it? And so same idea all over again. Deepwater Horizon, you know, we were spraying dispersants, but we were spraying them in a place that was on top of, as I learned at this New Orleans parish meeting from Louisiana, some LSU folks who came to the table. They said, well, you're spraying right on top of the bluefin tuna larvae. It's like, and I knew that because I had responded to questions earlier that said, you're spraying on top of us. And so I brought the plane tracks and said, no, we're not spraying on you. Look, these are the exact plane tracks. And that's when they said, well, you're spraying on all the bluefin tuna spawning grounds. We had to work with vessels of opportunity and fishermen. Well, they didn't want to wear our PPE. They wanted to wear their PPE. And so everybody was really unhappy, and we put a lot of people out of business. So this idea of, you know, food, commercial or subsistence, whether marine or mammals, birds, eggs, we don't have perfect science to inform credible decisions real time. And I see that we can't ever get, we got to do better at that somehow. Now, I know people, I can see some of my colleagues saying, are you kidding me? We're doing all we can do. We can't do anymore. That's not our job. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Can we do any more if we're really efficient, if we're, you know, if ICS is flexible and adaptable? Can we with all our preparedness? Okay, so now it's your turn. So tell me in your own words, and we're going to see the rolling grid here, just in your mind, what makes a spill response complex? Your words, not our words, no multiple choice. You can say whatever you want. So I'm going to start the countdown. See how it just scrolls so everybody can see real time what people are thinking. This is pretty, you see how complex these, so I suggest that all these are valid. So what do we do about this? How do we get ahead of a complex spill? Change through time. That's a very good theme. Especially when it comes to facts. Okay. So again, this is sort of an illustration of what it is we really, you know, just to illustrate this tool. Okay. So I'm going to have to move my little screen. So this is the Costco-Busan spill. So I suggest, these are my observations, take or leave as you feel relates to the way you look at things. A large, notice I didn't say volume, because it can be a deep water horizon, but we can also have smaller spills. Costco-Busan was not that big a spill. And it could be a persistent oil for sure when it's, as Jerry Galt would say, very photogenic, the black oil that you can see. But it could also be a non-persistent oil if Steve Lehman's on the phone, like the North Cape, right? A light oil. And so if these spills attract the intense ongoing attention of the media, local community, political officials, non-governmental organizations, and researchers, it's going to get complicated. If it's close, if it's nearby a community with a high level of social and environmental activism, it's going to get complicated. If it threatens high value environmental areas like endangered species and refuges, definitely. If it threatens the livelihoods, way of life of people who are dependent upon tourism, fishing, aquaculture, and especially during the active season, it's going to get complicated. Proximity to academics and institutions or research sites. If we have things where they've studied, and now we know the Gulf of Mexico has been studied a lot over the last 10 years. If we have a big spill there, I suggest there will be a lot of interest in it, and it may become more complex. We can't just work within our command post bubble. If we use dispersants or non-mechanical response options, it's going to get complicated. And now, you know, risk to human health, it's more complicated than Open 90's National Contingency Plan enables us to do within our NCP framework. So, okay, so now, when is an oil spill a disaster? So there are all kinds of disaster researchers out there. And I'll just offer one definition here. Disasters are complex crisis situations that have economic, social, and psychological effects on communities, organizations, families, and individuals. Now, the thing here to keep in mind is complex. So there's an assumption, even 20, 30 years ago, that disaster researchers knew that it's likely to exceed the plans that we have in place. They knew that 30 years ago. We didn't know it because it's not part of, I mean, I knew it because I had to do a paper for the oil spill conference on implementing a effective response management system in 1995, but that's not what we all think normally. So people who view some oil spills as disasters, and specifically technological disasters, those that are human caused, and they consider those disasters preventable. So we're already behind the 8 ball if a complex spill that people see as disasters occurs, because they already thought you should have prevented this. Why didn't you prevent it? So now I'm going to try and explain a little bit more. So I've thought about this human dimension because of my assignments for a long time. So relatively few spills have, this is for us really, relatively few spills have been shown to directly and adversely affect human, mental, or physical health, although many may have socioeconomic, ecological, and other effects of concerns. Whether any direct human effects occur from future spills will depend upon incident-specific conditions, such as spilled oil, type and volume, location, time of year, response actions, and safety and health protocols. Now, the susceptibilities of people to be affected by an oil spill is increased by pre-existing conditions. We had a spill today with COVID in our, well, it's not in our rearview mirror anymore, or if they are naturally unhealthy, if they had previous disaster experience, like in Katrina 5 years before Deepwater Horizon, incident-specific general life stressors, traumas. So there's research that's been done on human effects on 8 large spills. And again, I'm using large, but Exxon Valdez, Brer, so this is not research we normally look at. CM Prestige, Tasman Spirit in Pakistan, Erica, Nethoka in Japan, Hebe Spirit in South Korea, Fed Levine's on there, he went there, Deepwater Horizon. So I just want to say, when this human health stuff started in 2010, and I was trying to say I need a toxicologist to address these human health concerns on dispersants, so I really collaborated with the safety and health folks. And one of the toxicologists for BP really helped me, and we began working together. And they finally gave me my own toxicologist to talk to. But ultimately, I heard about in June 24th through 26th, I think, 2010, that the National Academy was having a workshop on the human effects from the Gulf oil spill. And I thought, what the heck? We need, I went to the BP incident commander. I said, we need to send somebody to this thing. They need to know that we're, what are they thinking? That we're not doing anything? So we went, and I went. I was the only one for the command post to go. And I was shocked by everything that was being told. And it was organized. I was going to do this, but I didn't. So you all may remember in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2011, there was an article authored by Bernie Goldstein, Maureen Lichfeld, and Howard Osofsky on all National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine researchers on the Gulf oil spill. And I got to know all 3 of them. I would presume to say pretty well over the next 10 years. And what I've learned, I've collaborated with GOMRI researchers, and what we've learned has been captured. And I was asked by the National Academy to chair a workshop on preparing for the next big oil spill for communities. And I asked all the researchers, we're never going to read all your papers. We, meaning oil spill, we're never going to do it. So you got to come up with some way to make it easier for us to understand. And I sort of saw the graphic, if Lisa DePinto's on, that the damage assessment folks did, which looked like a sort of a constellation. And I began working with researchers, and I said, could we do something like this for human health effects? And this diagram I'm going to show you is published in the GOMRI synthesis in the Oceanography magazine, Human Health. Ours is chapter 13, Human Health and Socioeconomic Effects. So I was the oil spill practitioner who was one of the authors, the rest of the academics. And my section in that article, there's a link to it, was on the oil spill workers. So here's the graphic. So Possible human effects. I know I'm almost over. I don't have too many more slides. Possible effects of okay, this is based on those 8 studies. Possible human effects of 8 large marine oil spills. And they all worked with me. We started off in a table and we looked at, okay, here's the oil. So there are stressors. These are the primary stressors: risk perceptions, lack of familiarity, ambiguity, harm or loss, hazard exposure to what, direct, indirect, how much and how long, loss of livelihood and control, right? They don't control, these people are affected by fishermen. They have no control over anything. They don't have a place at the table with FDA. They have no control over anything. They're just, we'll let you know when it's safe to go fish again. Interpersonal toxicity, Dwayne Gill, Liesl Ritchie, Steve Fuku did incredible work on understanding kind of what happens to people. And so if the Caucasian fishermen got work and the Vietnamese fishermen didn't get work, that's interpersonal toxicity. One group is now adversely affected from the situation by another. Uncertainty, recreancy is a sociological word, means you should have prevented that. We trusted government and industry to prevent this problem. And sociologists predict that word. I don't know how they came up with the word. Secondary traumas, complex, confusing response and compensation regimes. Another trauma, perceived inequities and outcomes, contested damages and compensation. You see this compensation theme is a big deal. Lack of closure, no clear path or timeline for recovery, influx of outsiders. Everybody said, why are all these people from outside Alaska coming in to respond? Why are all the people from outside the Gulf, Louisiana, responding? So these are complicating things. The vulnerable populations are the natural resource dependent communities. That's sociology for fishermen and watermen and subsistence personal use. Charter boat captains, like the one who committed suicide during Deepwater Horizon. Response workers, yes, they are vulnerable because they're closer to the oil. We do take measures to protect them. Is it enough? Maybe, maybe not. People living on or near the hazards. So the people are nearby communities. Children, pregnant women. I know you don't understand that. How could pregnant women be affected? I'll just give you an example. We put a fisherman out of business. He can't fish. He's not the most highly educated person on the planet. He goes home, he drinks, he has a pregnant wife. He may do things he shouldn't do. Now there's stress on the pregnant woman. So how far do we go with indirect effects? I'm just saying. And people with chronic illness, health. And we know that people in Louisiana have documented suboptimal health lifestyles. People who smoke all the time, for example. So we have psychological effects on individuals, physical effects on individuals, economic effects on individuals and communities, sociological effects on communities, and cultural effects on communities. Now, are we going to have this on every spill? No. Are we going to have some of this on every spill? Maybe, maybe not. Do we care about it? Well, I think we have to care enough to be informed about it. What we do about it, do we have a regulatory framework to let us do anything about it? I don't know. Do we have legal capabilities to do anything about it? I don't know. But I think the first important step is understanding things that we may not know about oil spills. Okay, so my humble suggestions to adapt. Engage and collaborate in two-way learning, like Mentimeter for interactive training. We can do real-time stakeholder engagement and polling. And all of this will help transfer knowledge. We'll learn what people are thinking, and we can share what we know to help, to get to some sort of shared understanding, less about us versus them. You're right, I'm right, you're wrong, all of that. So we'll need there is discretion within the oil spill response framework and preparedness framework. There is discretion there. Some FOSCs pay attention to some things, other FOSCs pay attention to other things, RTs, same thing. I would say in Region 6, I'm just gonna say it, Mike Sams, Caroline Deboucher, are in my region, Region 3, I think I know that they are open to new insights and discovering ways to adapt the system and even ICS. And some of these adaptations are included in the 2014 Incident Management Handbook, because Region 3 allowed me to put in my suggestions. Now, here's the most important thing. Let's assume that in a complex oil spill, things are going to happen that we don't have in our plans. And we don't have a protocol to address. So therefore, we should have a protocol on how to address emerging issues. Something's going to come out of the blue. What is our standard go-to process for dealing with that instead of making one up at the time? You know, and I suggest in RT, the Incident Management Preparedness Advisors, we could have a protocol in every single RT that says, if an emerging issue happens, this is how we're going to handle it. What process, who we're going to talk to, what we're going to do. We could have a protocol. I suggest that in order to get to the people aspects, they have the connections at the local level. We work through the state representatives, and in turn, who can help us connect with local emergency managers, right? Because that's the Stafford Act group. They know those groups. We don't know that. We're NCP. We're top down. Stafford Act is bottom up. But we can work through the state ROT representatives. And following California's example, assistant liaison officers, especially people from the community who can become assistant liaison officers. Loosen control of messages. We got to share information. There's social media research that says if we share control, we have a chance of getting ahead. So, but we have to focus on the oil. So if we can't do everything, we can share information about the response with information sources who are trusted by communities to address emerging questions and concerns. It could be, in our case on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, we'll share information with the Nature Conservancy that we've been partnering with for the, thanks to, yay, Frank Sulak, and, you know, to be open to that, and our state RT representatives to collaborate with the NGOs here. It could be state or local departments of health. It could be community health workers who exist everywhere. We could partner with them. And bottom line is, you know, we could apply research knowledge to strengthen our decision making. Certainly by kind of trying to understand the research implications, since NCP hasn't really been updated. What does that mean for how we can do things better? And maybe even reaching out to some researchers to help come into the command post, and if they're willing, and come into the command post. And I always used to do this at VIMS. I'd say, okay, we got a fishing boat that went aground in this location, and it was full of dead menhaden and really rotten fish and oily fish. If that thing broke apart at this location, what's the worst could happen? Oh, that's the major seed oyster bed in the entire Chesapeake Bay. Well, in Virginia's, no, well, Virginia, Maryland seed oyster bed. What do we do about that? Well, we talk to the researcher, who knows, call up Dexter Haven. Dexter, are those seed oyster beds spawning? Nope, they're not spawning. Okay, good. We can go ahead and mess around with that vessel. That's an example. Okay, so the benefits is we can transfer knowledge to help us inform credible, appropriate, timely decisions. We can make more accurate and complete sense of the situation, what people are thinking out there, what they're worried about, and that will help us mitigate impacts. I'll give you another example here in Virginia. The Navy had a fuel oil spill that went right next to into a drainage ditch, went off the base, went into a housing area. Why would anybody build a housing area next to a master jet base? You know, go figure. But anyway, it did. The FOSC said, these people are going, my words, not FOSC words, these people are going crazy. They think they can smell the oil. They think they're getting affected. They've got headaches. Where monitors are saying, no, it's below. Frank Sulak can tell you more about this. It's below health and safety levels for monitoring. It's okay. They're saying, no, we're not okay. We're problems. You have to move us somewhere. The Navy said, we're not paying for hotels for people. That's not what we have to do. The Coast Guard FOSC went to the National Pollution Fund Center and said, we're putting these people up in hotels. So I'm just another example. We got to leverage multi and cross-disciplinary insights beyond the incident management team. And we have to share the best available knowledge of the incident management team outside the command post. Now I know I'm running late. but we got to reduce barrier. These will help us, I believe, reduce barriers to successful response. Thank you. Quick thing, supporting information, the national workshop on the communities, Montgomery Research Synthesis, Region 6. We've got 2 new appendices, science and technologies advisors. That's academia, seafood liaison people. There's a community engagement guidance I did for whales. And you can see that in papers in the Oil Spill Conference. One last little bit. Your next speaker is going to be Steve Lehman. So Steve, we've known one another. This is when all the guys came to see me. He's a dog lover and came to see me after I had my child who was born Exxon Valdez baby, like Ed Levine's baby. We had 2 Exxon Valdez babies. You may know everybody there. The SSCs came to see me, Gary Ott. And Steve is a professor. He talks like a professor. He sounds like a professor. He knows so much about all these issues after all these years. And I'm so lucky you get to hear him next. Okay, one last opportunity. In an oil spill, what does success look like to you? I added this at the last minute, Tim.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I'm going to start the countdown just so we know what is success. It's a rolling grid of thing. Again, you can put in whatever your own words.
Hey, while people are answering that, I'm just going to say thank you, Ann. What we've done in the past is we're going an hour and 15 minutes. So we have a few more minutes of our kind of allotted time, but assuming people stay and you're willing, Ann Hayward we can answer questions past the allotted time. But anyway, I really appreciate it. I think that was a great talk, and I knew you were going to do a good job. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, oh boy, questions are popping in. I'm going to let Lynn go through the questions, but let me just start things off while questions are coming in. I think what, kind of the fundamental of what you said is kind of communications 101. And it's that know your audience, but listen to your audience and adapt, right? That's kind of a key message that you've given me since I first met you, Ann Hayward. And I really think this Mentimeter thing, now that I think about it and see what you're describing here, I really think that's such a powerful tool to be able to listen to your audience in real time. And I know I've gone through entire presentations, and then at the end, somebody asks the most simple question that, like, I should have had a whole slide on that, but I was thinking at a different level or a different perspective. And but this tool here allows us to kind of get information real time, adapt, and then at the end, learn about how much, if we had an impact or not on the audience, so that we can do better the next time. So
right,
I think those are really great things, and I appreciate you talking about it. So why don't we, Ann Hayward, if you open your Q&A, you can see the questions too. But Lynn, you want to go through?
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen then, right?
I don't think you need to stop sharing your screen. We can see the questions.
I'm going to minimize the screen. Okay, I'm going to minimize. I'm going to minimize.
I think it's interesting to see these answers go up on here, but Lynn, you want to just go to the first question?
Okay. Yeah. I thought
there we are.
Okay. So I thought that before I go through the questions, I will kind of give a short announcement for the next 3 months plan. And thank you, Ann Hayward, to introduce our next speaker. So in October, so Steve Lehman will talk about how oil spill have been perceived by public. And in November, our guest speaker will be Ed Owens. He will talk about the options for treating shorelines. And then it's in December, it will be a fun, kind of a happy hour Zoom meeting. We are going to invite all 4 speakers back to have a roundtable discussion of their fun stories during the spills. So we hope that you're gonna enjoy all these talks in the future and join us again. So let's go through these questions. So we have one on losing control of messages. The legal review step cannot be skipped for our outgoing messages. So what legal needs to do?
Well, I'm going to give you my perception of an answer, not necessarily what's right or wrong for any future situation. Based on my experience, I would say, and I'm assuming this may be an industry person, if the FOSC and Unified Command, remember the old thing from just after Exxon Valdez and the OPA 90, the Coast Guard has 51% of the vote. If the Coast Guard FOSC says, we are sharing this information, period, we're sharing the information. And in my experience, even in Deepwater Horizon, the legal team will still, I mean, I remember the legal team came and watched me in my worst, what I thought was my worst community engagement meeting in La Rose, Louisiana. It was the worst one I ever had. I had like 40 F-bombs flying at me. And anyway, they thought, oh, you did okay. So I think if the FOSC is still the leader, and I think other countries are probably a little less rigid than we are in the States, I think. Like the UK, they've already sort of adapted this community-based some approaches better than we have, I think. Okay, I hope that's a decent answer.
You know, Ann Hayward, I'd suggest that this kind of talk, you know, we have industry attorneys, and the responsible party is going to have to, you know, that can be a roadblock, especially if the attorneys think that they're going to have, you know, a couple days.
Maybe too.
A couple days to come back and, you know, really go and cross the T's and dot the I's on every little thing, every little communication. They need to see your presentation here to understand the cost of allowing a void to happen while information is vetted, because voids get filled and it may not get filled with the messages that are accurate even.
That's right. Well said, Tim.
Okay, so next question, per your comments about going beyond what's required for cleanup of complex spills, do you recommend including additional standards in the cleanup endpoints to reflect our efforts to clean up sociological impact of sticking to the environmental impact?
Well, really great question. And again, I'm not a prescriber. I don't believe, so the problem with standards is, what if the next spill doesn't meet a standard per se, right? What if we have to do a new standard? So I'm a big one to let the spill sort of dictate. So the process should allow for, a standard process can allow for an incident-specific solution, I guess is what I would say. And there was just recently, Ed Levine is on the line, and he attended the offshore situation room, preventing the next big offshore spill. And a lot of the things that I've said, I reviewed the proceedings since I couldn't attend, are consistent with what I'm saying here. So I feel really good about what I'm saying here. And the bottom line is, I collaborated again with Liesl Ritchie and Dwayne Gill. They're now at Virginia Tech. They were at University of Oklahoma. And anyway, we've come up with an idea, which is kind of like, they've come up with an idea, which is kind of a parallel to SCAT. And if you look at my OSPO conference paper in the last session that I did with Liesl and Dwayne, and also the Coast Guard's I'm at, and also the state of Virginia, and also Sector Hampton Roads or Virginia, we all three wrote this and said that there's a process we can implement similar to SCAT that will allow for kind of the human dimension piece. So you could look at that. Al, I'm sorry, somebody help Al. You have to go to the chat room, Al. It's a sidebar. Oh, wait, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, he got it. He sent out the question. How can we make better use of trusted community information source?
So I think the one thing we can do ahead of time during RRT meetings especially is we can think outside the, I did this working through Gomri, trying to take, I had a 3-year project, well, actually a 6-year project funded with as part of backwards outreach outreach back to the response community. And you can do this during preparedness at the area level, or as Mike Sandler would say, the local level, area level doesn't have enough time. Hi, Lauren, good to see you there. Brilliant during Deepwater, but the RRT can do some of this, and so they can do it for the sectors. So they can work at an RRT level and say, who are the trusted sources of information that within your state people turn to? And we can identify them ahead of time, and we can know who they are, and we can actually have, well, what I sort of tried to do in Virginia, we could even have a dark side of a network set up to have those linkages already ready to launch. And we can just meet with them and share information. Say, can we share information with you when if the time ever comes? And these are people who know how to make sense of toxicity, and they can explain it, and they're trusted. Now, just the big caveat, nothing is 100%. There's always extremes at either end, but we probably can make better work and come out better, have better success within all the people between the two sets of extremes.
Hey, let me add something, man. It's something I've been thinking about, and so it's part of the trusted community. A big part of, I think, is the academic community, and so I was before lockdowns. I was at maybe the last kind of open RRT6 meeting, and we had an academic from, gosh, I think it was the University of Texas, come and kind of say, you know, we need to have better communications between the RRTs and the academics, right? But it struck me that the challenge is it's what motivates. So everyone at the RRT6 meeting, except that academic, had a strong motivation to be there, right? Their boss expected them to be there, right? And they were being paid to be there, and they were probably being paid for their hotel and their expenses and everything else. And the academic wasn't, right? So their reward system is completely different than the reward system for everyone, right? Everyone else there. It'd be great it'd be great here that we had one academic, right? And we really blanketed everyone in the invite to this thing, but their reward system doesn't reward them for attending RRT6 meetings, right? And that's a big challenge of how do we get over, right? If we had a set of, you know, a consistent set of academics who came to the RRT6 meetings, and we could directly communicate them to us and us to them, and the RRT, you know, the government folks, that would be great. And then we'd have this kind of trusted community who at least we were communicating
Right.
together more consistent. But that's the challenge, right? Is there
a challenge?
The reward system for academics does not. I mean, one of the guys, Steve May, retired right after that. And I guarantee you Steve May is not going, he's an EPA person. I guarantee you he's not going to be at any.
Right.
So
it is.
Now, that.
It is. And so what I'll say, now Steve Lehman's on the phone because I saw his chat. So Steve and I went round and round about this a lot from 2014 to for a couple of years. Now Steve works with all the, you know, the SSC came about because of the Argo Merchant in 1976, because all the academic institutions in the Pacific, I mean, in the Northeast, New England, which Steve has worked with for 20, 30 years. So every region is different. In my region, because I was at VIMS, I believe it's possible, and I created something through Gomery, which wasn't adopted. I think you can send something out to people and ask people if they want to be included and all that sort of stuff. But I think you're right. The bottom line is there are some that want to be included. If this bill happens and people want to be included, we have now a protocol which could be adopted real time in Region 6. And this lays out in about 4 pages, if an academic wants to get involved, come inside the command post and collaborate with us to say, okay, I've studied this area, and they can do it from their office, right? I say inside the command post, could be virtual. They can do it from their office. We can call up and say, you know, you've studied the currents around the specific bay. Help us understand how we have to tweak our model, trajectory model, to capture all that. But there's a way to do that. Steve will probably talk to you about the way that he worked in New England, which is great. In the absence of that long-term relationship that Steve has with his guys, here's a model here for doing that. I guess that's my shortest answer I can do.
Okay.
Great. So my internet connection is sketchy today, so I have to turn off my video. Next question, what role do you think coastal communities can play in rapid response to oil spill?
Well, so those of you who know me have known that I have been, I'll say Steve, Ed, the SSCs know how I feel about this. I've tried so hard, and the state representatives too, to come up with a, if we tried hard enough, it would work. So I can say I gave it my all for this 2019 prep seminar, or prep exercise, and it simply doesn't work. It's not, engagement with the communities is not sustainable, because we're with most NGOs. Nature Conservancy here is different in Virginia because they own almost all the Barrier Islands in Virginia. But for most places, it's probably not. Maybe the Pacific States Task Force, they would have more luck. But generally, communities are, they just can't sustain. They're volunteer. They have other issues that are more important. I've tried to collaborate with fishermen. If it's a good fishing day, they're going to go to that instead of go to a meeting or a training session. So I think the best thing we can do is identify sources in know who that you can map your stakeholders. Josh Dubach did a great presentation on implementing that. Yvonne has done a great presentation on mapping stakeholders. We can map all that ahead of time. We can identify who they're likely to be ahead of time. But building relationships is probably not going to be very easy. So the states maybe are more trusted and known by the local emergency managers, who in turn know who the people are at the local level to reach out to the communities. And I say but I think that's about the most efficient we can be. The other thing I would suggest is I've come up with a protocol for a dark website that we can launch right away. It's different. I understand the response system. I think TRS has got something in their system now. I haven't seen that, but I think we have to be skinnier. We just don't all have the effort to do everything. So I say plan as much as you can ahead of time to have information ready to launch, which is the kind of stuff I've got in my little prototype, a little outline, basically. Have that ready to launch the moment that a spill happens. And then you connect with people, get them to log in, and then you can begin to transmit directly, share information directly. The legal teams are a problem, government included, not just industry.
Yeah, okay. So next question, in this world of alternative facts and the conspiracy theories, do you have any examples of how to overcome this barrier in reaching the community?
Well, I think it's going to be the trusted sources. I'll give you some examples from Deepwater Horizon. I will be forever grateful to BP leadership who gave me, I'm trying to think of the right word. They didn't even know me, except for Dave Fritz. And they let me kind of do what I thought needed to be tried. And some of the things worked and some things didn't work. We brought one woman who was an influencer, a wife of a fisherman, into the command post, tried to share information with her. We all cried around a table, the whole thing, the whole day. Didn't work at all. Next day, one of her colleagues said, something that was misinformation. And she said, well, I guess those people on the command post aren't as smart as they think they are. So that was a bomb. On the other hand, one thing we did was we organized an overflight for primarily fishermen. We included a Vietnamese fisherman. We also included, so Sea Grant, oil spill, Sea Grant, I would say Sea Grant Extension Network, especially the fishing extension agents almost everywhere around the coast, and the oil spill extension agents now in the Gulf of Mexico. they're an ideal place to tap into a lot of people at the local level. Anyway, I did one thing. BP let me, well, they let me do several things that were innovative. One thing, we did an overflight. We had Rusty Gaudet, who is the commercial extension, Sea Grant commercial fishing agent for Louisiana, and fishermen. We went up, Doug Helton narrated, or, you know, went up and basically talked to everybody about, explain what they were seeing. I thought that was hugely powerful. We came back, went to lunch. Jim Black, if you all remember him from BP, the ops section chief, he said, go ahead, do whatever, take him to lunch, talk to him. We did a debrief. It was very powerful, small scale though. The other thing I think that we tried is I was actually given permission to do I went through, again, Sea Grant, and at Louisiana, on August 2nd, we did a dispersant information meeting, and we worked through Louisiana, Sea Grant and LSU, and of course, Dear Ed Overton, to help connect all the researchers, as well as some of the agencies like Department of Louisiana, I think is now, used to be Department of Health and Hospitals. I think it's now just Department of Health. But anyway, they came because they're sort of outside our normal oil spill thing. It was hugely informative. It was a big success. BP let me do it again at this grassroots level, not at the NAS level. It was hugely successful, but it was one time. I think we could have leveraged that. So, and the way to start that, if you don't have something like Steve is going to talk to his team B when he comes on, maybe, is this model for the Appendix 41. But these are examples that I thought were pretty good, but they were one shot. I told you the one that didn't work at all, and I think worth trying again. But we should work through assistant liaison officers to try and get that happening, and through the state to identify who those people should be and collaborate with and share information. And I should also say, I was, since I had to do these community meetings, I had to begin assessing the risk, right, and make sense of how do we answer the questions and concerns. So my little section, 2-person section, was ORCA. We all had clever names. Oil Risk Communications and Assessment. And we would spend time, I would spend time listening to questions and concerns, go through the command post, try and get answers to address those questions and concerns, take back to the meetings. So I think we adapt ICS. And we collaborate outside. Julie Falgo, who's in Hurricane Ida, her roof blew off. Those of you who just remember, she was an interface between the commercial fishing community. Ed Levine knows her well. Debbie Schultz, we worked with Julie so much. She was huge to help us during Deepwater Horizon. And we worked through Julie, and Julie could say, don't talk to this fisherman, talk to this one. This one will stab you in the back. This one is, you know, can help you. I've worked with the head of FDA since then. Well, he's not the head of FDA. Sorry, I misspoke. The head of FDA during Deepwater Horizon for the Seafood Safety Program in federal waters. He's now at University of Texas. He's at Texas. I know this is a terrible sin to mix up the universities. University of Texas, Corpus Christi, I think. And he said, well, we did risk communications. As soon as we knew, we went out to talk to them. Well, by then, you know, you come down from your seat on high and you finally tell them they can go back to work. What would you like if you were put out of work for an indefinite period of time? How would you feel about that? You're really happy now that 3 months later you hear information? I mean, we have to work through people. Okay, sorry.
All right, I think we got one more, Lynn. So
Yeah. One last question from Tom Cooper. What have you been most proud of during your advocacy efforts post Macondo?
Oh dear. Well, first of all, I never see myself as an advocate. I see myself as trying to I'm not trying to push one point of view, but rather bring different points of views together. And I guess what I would say, what I'm most proud of is the people who have enabled me to work, who didn't say, will you please stop and go away? I guess that's what I'm most proud of. It's the wonderful community of people that, you know, give me faith that we can do this. We can make progress, not for the extremes of a continuum, but for those in the middle, we can make progress. And working together, divided, we, you know, what is the word? What's that expression? United we stand, divided we fall. I think if we all work together, and I guess I'm well, and I am proud of collaborating with academics and trying to take that information, like in that figure. I feel pretty good about that figure, that it represents, you know, a bunch of papers that none of us are ever going to read, but they agree that it kind of captures enough of the essence to share. And for that to be a practitioner initiated graphic to be in the introduction of the Gomery synthesis on human health effects, I think that's okay, depending upon how you all think about it. You know, I know at least one person hates it, and so I don't expect everybody to like it. But the idea is, does it tell us, does it convey information at a glance that can help us, you know, think about new ways to do things better and be more successful?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, well, thank you, Anne. We've gone.
Thank you all.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Just a couple notes. We still have a few people on, but we're recording this. I think Lynn said that we're trying to get things posted as quickly as we can on the API website, and we'll give those details on the next invite, assuming we get them posted up there, because we have not complete control over when things get posted on the API website. So great talk, Anne, and we look forward to. I see that Steve Lehman was on. I'm not sure he still is, but we look forward to listening to Steve's deep voice next month.
Okay. All the best, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.